the biggest lesson I've learned is that follow your passions and just go at them 100% and take advice, listen to other people, surround yourself in whatever industry that you're doing so that you can build a network of support of people that are going to lift you up and are going to push you and motivate you.
From REtipster.com, this is the REtipster podcast. This show is all about using your limited time and energy to invest in real estate with lower risk and bigger rewards. If you want to build more financial freedom from real estate without putting your life savings on the line, this show is for you.
Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Seth Williams and my co-host Jaron Barnes of the REtipster podcast. Today we're talking with my friend and property manager, Tim VandenToorn. So just want to give you a quick backstory here. Tim and I actually went to high school together, but I don't think we ever actually talked at length until about 6 months ago when I ran into him at the gym where we both work out. We're just chatting for a little bit and I found out he was a property manager, and not just any property manager, but he runs, I believe it's the second biggest residential property management company in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So he's not like just this small time, I'm managing 2 or 3 properties on the side. He's kind of got a lot going on. And the timing of this was kind of funny because I had been working with my own property management company, managing a couple of my rentals for the past 6 or 7 years. And when I first hired them, they were pretty good. But as time had gone on, I wasn't sure if maybe it was just my perception or what, but it just felt like their quality of work was kind of getting worse and worse. And they were dropping the ball all over the place. And every time I'd visit my rentals, it was just like, man, this place is disgusting. So I decided to give Tim's outfit a shot. And so far they've been doing an amazing job, like the picture perfect example of what a property manager is supposed to be, which is a huge improvement from the service I had been getting. And, when I found out Tim was running this kind of business and, I had a good experience with him, I thought, he'd be a great guy to have on the REtipster podcast. First of all, for anyone out there who owns rental properties, whether you manage them yourself or if you outsource this work to a professional property manager like Tim, you know how important this job is. I mean, this really makes or breaks your success in the rental property business. When you think about your ability to find good tenants and keep your properties in good working order and get rid of bad tenants, I mean, everything kind of hinges on that. If you can't do it, it all falls apart. So I figured, why not talk with somebody who clearly knows how to do this well? But also, say if you are managing your own rentals and you're kind of tired of it, maybe you want to be able to scale this and buy more and not have it control every aspect of your life. It's imperative that you figure out where and how to find a good property manager that will actually do a good job. And believe me, many of them do not. It's not the kind of thing where you can just enlist the help of the first one you come across and assume it's going to work out. I mean, it might if you get lucky, but it's not a guarantee. So years ago, I had published a blog post with a list of a lot of the questions that I ask when I'm interviewing a new potential property manager. And I thought it'd be interesting to run Tim through these questions just to show you how this actually can give you kind of a good idea for how good or how incompetent your property manager is. And I'm actually going to link to that blog post in the show notes for this episode in case you want to check them out. We're not going to go through all the questions, but a lot of the basics we'll cover. And by the way, the show notes for this episode, retipster.com/38. And I also want to talk with Tim about his experience as a real estate investor and property manager over the past decade or so, because, I don't know anybody really who manages as many units as Tim does. And he's seen a lot of what's out there. And I'm just curious to hear what goes into the running of an operation of this size. And from a personal level, what are the best parts about running this kind of business? What are the worst parts? What are the biggest obstacles that he faced early on in his career? And really just any recommendations or words of advice he might have for other people who want to get into this kind of business. So with that, Tim, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Well, thanks. Yeah, thank you for that introduction. And I will say, I think you graduated with my wife. So I told her I was on this podcast, or I was going to be on this podcast, and she wanted me to send the warmest hello to you.
Awesome.
Fond memories of you in high school.
That's right.
That's always great.
For sure.
You were we met at the gym. You're right. We kind of picked up, and you were very humble in your approach. You kind of picked my brain. I didn't even know you were involved in real estate during that first meeting. And it wasn't until the second meeting where you said, well, I run this dynasty here and land investing. And I'm like, what? How did you keep that quiet during our first discussion? And that's kind of kicked it off. And I said, well, man, we need to get together. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Man, guys, a lot of bromancing going on. I feel like a third wheel over here.
I don't know how we got through high school without like hanging out more.
Oh, man.
So I guess just to kick this off, Tim, why don't you tell us a little bit about, I mean, I already know this because you told me, but for those of the listeners out there, what was your backstory? How did you first decide to get involved with real estate? Where were you at in life when you decided to do this? And what attracted you to this profession?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story. So I graduated high school and my career ambitions were in law enforcement. So back in 2000, it was difficult to get into law enforcement and took me a few years. And I was involved in some level of law enforcement for about 7 years, ending in 2011 with a road patrol position here locally in Michigan. And it came to a point where I had to make a decision on whether I was going to pursue my career in law enforcement or if I was going to pursue my marriage, to put it kind of frankly.
Yeah.
Very difficult position. I was sacrificing a lot to advance inside the organization, allowing my family and relationship with my wife to erode through that. So kind of came to a point in 2011 where I had to make a decision on what direction I was going to go. And that was to pursue my wife or to pursue law enforcement. So at that point, there was an opportunity to come on board at the family business, which is United Properties here. My dad had started it about 3 years earlier. My brother was a part of the company. We were small, about 5 full-time employees at the time when I came on board. And since that, we've grown to about just over 20. We started with about 200 units when I came on board, and we're about 850 today. And growing very quickly.
So, first of all, congrats on saying no to the right thing and pursuing your marriage. I know that.
Yeah, difficult, but it is what is important. And, we're happily married for going on 16 years now, if you can believe that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's just funny to me how, work is like that one thing that at any point we can replace it. Like we can figure out ways to find another job or another career. Or, it might be kind of a disruption, but like it's always possible to figure something else out if you need to. But it's surprisingly easy to let like the really important things fall by the wayside, which is just weird to me. Like I've had to fight that battle my whole life. I don't know why it's hard. Like logically, it makes no sense. But I don't know. Maybe it's like a type A personality, ambitious person thing. But So what are the types of properties that you guys manage? Is it like single family houses or apartment buildings, or what is it exactly?
Yeah, so we focus primarily on single family and small multi-unit properties up to basically 10 units. I would say our specialty is single families and duplexes. And that is the majority of our portfolio, which means we have a lot of owners and a lot of different properties. It's much different than apartment complex managing. And we just kind of found our niche. There's some bigger companies here in Grand Rapids that really go after the apartment complexes, and it's very competitive business. So we focus primarily on single families and duplexes.
So just to clarify, you did not start this company, right? Was it your dad that started it, or how did that happen?
My dad started it. He did business consulting, merger and acquisition prior to that. Always been involved in real estate to some degree, had rental properties, et cetera. Kind of got into the investing more as a career, actually as a brainchild of my sister. And she gave the idea or shown interest in it. So he says, that's probably a good thing to explore. He got serious about it 2008, and then she actually went into the medical field and never joined the company. And when he started with my younger brother.
I only own like 4 units right now. And for me, like, that's not enough. That's not even close to enough to like cover my living expenses. And it's just way, way unpredictable. Like it could be fine for 1 year and then it's terrible the next year. In your opinion, how many does it take? I know the answer is it probably just depends, but generally speaking, like how many rentals do you need to sort of smooth out the income so that it's enough to live on and there's no huge spikes in revenue. It's not like everything just crashes at the same time. Like, is 20 the number, do you think?
I would say, some of that depends on how leveraged you are. 20 is a very, very comfortable number in my opinion. But I got in 2011 where property prices were, a third of, or maybe even less of where they are today. So I was fortunate when I got involved. I had some savings and was able to pay for a lot of my properties for cash at that time. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't highly leveraged, and I was always kind of a conservative investor. I didn't really start using leverage till probably 2014 or 2015. Mm-hmm. But if you're highly leveraged on every one of those and you're only cash flowing $200-$300 per property, 20 might not be enough. Mm-hmm. But I see a lot of people leaving their day jobs when they have around 10 to 15 properties.
Okay. No, that's good to know.
Not stopping there, but just focusing more on it and having the comfort, to have that income coming in without their primary job.
Mm-hmm. So Tim, I want to ask the exact same question related to the property management business. At what time do you think that you could actually go full-time as a property manager? How many rental properties do you have to have under management before it's considered a viable business that can pay the bills and handle employees, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to say you could make a living off of managing 50 rental properties, depending on the rental price, obviously, because property management oftentimes is based on a percentage of the rents collected. And so it depends on
if I have 50 cardboard boxes I'm renting out to people and I'm charging like $10 a month.
Exactly.
That probably wouldn't work. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. So our average rents are around $1,000. And I would say that, 50 properties you could probably start making a decent living off of. I have friends in the industry that are self-managing with one or two other kind of virtual assistants around 100 properties, and making a good business out of it. And they're starting to outsource and use technology and those types of things so you can do more with less. But once you get over that 100 to 150 range, then you really start needing more employees and you just can't handle things on your own. So I think most management companies will make that transition of getting full-time staff around 100 units.
Okay. And you've got, I think you said 20 people on staff. Is that right?
Yeah. So we have 10 employees in the office. Mm-hmm. We have 2 full-time virtual, we call them remote assistants, I guess, remote assistants in Mexico that work for us full time doing, whether it's answering phones or billing or that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And then we also use a service in India that does a lot of our data entry, just the mundane stuff that we can build processes for, and they take care of a lot. So we have been outsourcing a lot more. We have 10 in the office. Those remote assistants, like I mentioned, and then we have a handful of full-time technicians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, I know like a huge part of this business and making it work is getting good tenants in place who pay on time and stick around for a while, that kind of thing. How do you screen tenants and make sure you're getting good people to live in these units, other than just like running a credit report and background check? Like, is there anything else you do to make sure these people are legit?
Yeah, so we have a very thorough screening process. Obviously, we subscribe to a software that allows us to run national criminal and credit background checks. Mm-hmm. We also utilize local resources here to check on their background. We check landlord references, employment history, length of employment, obviously evaluate their credit reports, the amount of debt. There's a lot of information you can find online about people these days. And we utilize all those aspects. I think that last time I was surveying property managers, it was determined that we do have a more strict screening policy than the other local managers here. Mm-hmm. And part of that is because our economy is so great. So we can tighten those restrictions when there are tenants, just knocking on our door to rent properties. So with the vacancies low, we can become really strict on our policies. When we find that things are changing, we may loosen those up a little bit or offer some sort of incentive, to apply and that type of thing. But fortunately, Grand Rapids has been a fantastic city to own and manage properties in.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of crazy how it's changed since the days of like 2011.
Yeah,
Like
it's
yeah, it's just
unbelievable.
I'm still in shock. Like when I think of how much I bought mine for and like how
Hmm.
much I could probably sell them for today, it's just like,
Hmm.
whoa, what happened?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, one thing about kind of related to that screening process is the importance of getting, a deadbeat tenant out of your place when they stop paying or
Hmm.
something goes horribly wrong.
Hmm.
And that right there, like that task is basically what's always kept me from even trying to manage my own
Hmm.
properties because I hate just the idea of the
Yeah,
confrontation and the
yeah,
conflict and hearing
yeah,
a sob story and
yeah.
having to, I just, everything about that, I just hate it. So, in my mind, for somebody like me, that's a huge value add is
Hmm.
to have somebody who recognizes the problem and handles it promptly. And
Yeah.
just out of curiosity, how do you guys handle evictions? Like, what does it take to get evicted? What mechanisms do you have in place to make sure it happens on time and minimizes damage?
Yeah, that's definitely a benefit of a property manager because there's systems in place. So it takes a lot of the emotion out for owners.
Yeah.
Not to say we don't get the emotional stories; we get them monthly,
Yeah.
and we really blame a lot of stuff on fair housing. I mean, the long and the short of it is we have to follow our written procedures and treat everybody the same. So when it comes to a tenant who says, "Hey, I had an unexpected car bill," um, you know, you obviously empathize with them, and it's unfortunate, but we can't delay the rental collection, we can't delay the late fee, we can't delay the court process, et cetera, and that's because of fair housing. We just cannot make exceptions or play favorites with tenants.
Mm-hmm.
So once our staff understands that and understands that, you can't have emotion in that type of situation, it becomes easier for them to talk with that tenant through to find a solution.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, we have actually a collections company, and we have a licensed collection agent that runs our accounts receivables. He's also our tenants relations manager, so he obviously gets to deal with the tenants who are upset or who can't pay rent, and he's the
Yeah.
one that takes them to court and sends a 7-day notice. And then we have an on-staff attorney. So we have a lot internally inside United Properties that allows us to make that process smooth. We're not outsourcing that to a third-party attorney. Our attorney knows what happens on a day-to-day basis with the tenants and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Our process is pretty automated. Rent is due on the 1st. If rent is not paid on the 1st, our system automatically generates 7-day notices, which are sent
Mm-hmm.
out to tenants immediately.
Yeah.
And during the next 7 to 10 days, depending on when the weekends are, during that time, we're utilizing it to determine where the rent is, to talk about payment plan, to let them know that the next process is going to be filing at court. And once we file at court, there's going to be additional charges that the tenant's responsible for. So an
Mm-hmm.
administrative fee, a filing fee, those types of things. And it's really difficult to get out of that hole once you're paying late fees and you're paying those court fees. So we put a lot of pressure on that tenant during that first 10 days to come up with money to pay rent, to at least
Mm-hmm.
hold off that court process. But
Mm-hmm.
it's very telling once a tenant gets in that once or twice. It's usually not more than once or twice and they learn, or it's going to be a systemic issue, and it's going to be during the course of their entire tenancy that they're trying to dig themselves out of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, Tim, what happens when there's a big expense within the rental property? Do you set some kind of a limit for your property owners to approve expenditures, or what's the process there?
Yeah, so we do things a little bit unique here. About 2 years ago, we started advising our owners or informing our owners of every single maintenance expense. So it used to be we started with a $300 threshold. Any expense over $300, we were going to notify owners. Any expense under $300, we were just going to go ahead and repair. Then we went to $500. And then after polling our owners and polling other owners who came from other management companies, we determined that a big reason for owners to change management companies was because of transparency to do with maintenance cost. So what would happen is an owner would get maybe 2 or 3 different expenses over the course of a month for $200. And at the end of the month, they would see a $600 expense, and they'd be surprised by that, and why weren't they notified, and that type of thing. So what we do differently, we still involve that owner in that conversation if it's going to be a larger repair, but at the same time, we're sending them a notification email, letting them know that a work order was opened for their property. We give them as much information as we know at that time when that work order was generated. So we have a summary of it, and a dispatcher here in the office who calls the tenant, tries to triage as much of the issue as possible, and then assigns it to a vendor, and our owners should get notified. So you'll know exactly what kind of expense you're looking at just based on that notification, or at least as much as we know. And then we follow that up with an email a couple days later letting the owner know that the issue was resolved. And we also supply a receipt and also pictures if the repair was done internally with our staff. So the owner knows what is being purchased at Home Depot, how much that was, and also they get to see a picture of that repair.
Yeah, and I can speak to that because I have gotten those pictures in those invoices, and totally, like, I understand what's going on. There's no question about that. And it's funny, like, I literally never got that stuff from my well, I don't know if I'd say never, but very, very rarely would I get that from my other property manager. And I think part of the reason was repairs just flat out weren't being made, like huge issues that had been reported to him just weren't being taken care of. So when United Properties took over, it was kind of a big bill, and I was kind of like, oh my word. But it was like, well, it's still good though to know that
that's several years of deferred maintenance, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's what happens if I just let my house fall into disarray for 7 years, there's going to be stuff to pay for. So, but along those same lines, like I remember back when I first bought my first rental property, and it was kind of a big stretch to come up with a down payment and all the cash needed and to take care of the existing issues that I inherited with that property. If somebody does not have the money for these repairs that just flat out have to be made, what then? Like, is there some way to help them with that, or how does that work?
Yeah. And Seth, you kind of hit the nail on the head there with when we take over new properties from other property management companies. That's a big hurdle for us sometimes to take care of, because they're coming from another management company where they may not have a lot of maintenance expenses, and then they bring it to us, and they're notifying them of all this stuff, and they're like, "Whoa, wait a minute." But once that gets straightened out, then you're going to have longer lasting tenants, lower vacancies. They're going to rent fast, that type of thing. So it's great there. You asked about large expenses. Yeah, we face that monthly. And it's honestly, it's just part of property management. We do offer some flexibility on that. I mean, we understand a lot of owners, especially owners now who are buying properties that are just totally, just counting on no maintenance. They're highly leveraged. They're getting into the market nowadays that they're just really watching things. They don't have that money, like you mentioned, to do a $2,000 furnace replacement. So if we have a property in the system that we're managing for and we are collecting rent, we will offer our investors a little bit of grace there on a payment. So we'll pay that. We'll make them pay it, back the following month through incoming rent. And also if they can, come up with money in the next 6 weeks, we appreciate that. If they don't, then we do let them know that there's going to be interest charges on that. So we do offer investors the opportunity to essentially loan money from us to pay for those repairs. But we try to steer away from that as much as possible. I mean, it doesn't take long when you're managing 800, 900 properties to be extending, a couple $100,000 worth of credit on repairs. And so it's something we really have to monitor.
So if I have no money, I want to go buy a property. Can you handle the down payment for me and do all the repairs and do everything and charge me no interest for that?
If you find a good property, Seth, we can talk, and we can maybe partner in some way on that. That's interesting though, because I did go look at a house the other day. The investor, was basically like, sign me up for management. I said, well, let me just go take a look at your house, go to the house. It was a mess, and, needed $10,000, $15,000 worth of repairs, a lot of functional issues and that type of thing. They had left out of state for a job, left their house behind, and were basically ready to go. And then when it came to asking them what their plans were for the repairs, they were like, oh, maybe you can loan us some money. And I'm like, not on the single family house. It's going to be, $10,000 to $15,000. So, there are times where we just say, look, this doesn't seem like this is going to be a good relationship for us. Not because we don't have the ability to do that, but when an owner, doesn't get income on their property for a year because they're paying back debt to you, it's just never a good feeling for that investor. And that's projected on a property manager. So we try to avoid those.
And you actually just said something there that, to me, it says something about a company when they feel free to say no to people, to turn down business, to say, sorry, Mr. Customer, but this isn't going to work, rather than somebody who just like takes on anybody and everybody's saying, sure, yep, we'll do it. We'll do it. Like, I don't know.
It's hard to do. Hard
Yeah.
to do. And I like sales and I like to close deals and those types of things. So it's very hard to say no to an opportunity, especially if you know you can make money off loaning money. But you just know at the end of the day that they're going to feel pressure because they're not getting a paycheck. And so even investors who come to me and say, hey, Tim, I know I need $15,000 worth of repairs, but I have a tenant in there right now. I just want to limp along until I have the money saved up. That's a recipe for a disaster for us because every month there's going to be maintenance over there. The owner's going to feel nickel and dimed. And so I always tell owners it's less expensive to do it up front, get that property prepared, get it on the market in the best possible light. Don't get involved before you have the ability to make sure you're presenting a good product, a quality product, a clean product. It's just not worth the headache.
Yeah. Now, do you have any like plans in place or like ways that you can increase my profits on each property as time goes on? Is that something you guys try to actively work on?
We do in the sense of we're monitoring, obviously, the location of the property. We don't have much to do with, but yours happen to be, if we want to talk about your portfolio, in a great location. So we can confidently make improvements on it, maybe kitchen upgrade, bathroom upgrade, those types of things, knowing that there's going to be a high demand for that property long term. So we're evaluating those types of things. We'll maybe push improvements a little bit more on investors who have better potential on their properties. But at some point, there's low income properties that are always going to be low income, that are always going to be Section 8, just due to the nature or location or condition of the property. And so we try to just evaluate those on a case-to-case basis. Other than that, we have systems built in for lease renewal processes, rental increases. We're negotiating those months in advance of the lease expiring. So we know what either to expect a turnover so we can reduce that vacancy or, negotiate a slightly higher rental amount, which obviously helps.
How much does it actually cost to hire a property manager? What's kind of the industry standard versus how much you charge? Because obviously you're a good one, right? So there might be a higher fee associated with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we provide a lot of value, and we're still at industry standard. I don't know what Seth paid at his last management company, but I'm relatively confident we're not more than his last management company, and we offer the same amount of services, if not more.
Yeah, I would agree. Believe I was paying the exact same price at my previous one and getting like not even half the value.
Sure.
So it's a huge step up to go with them.
So industry standard in Grand Rapids is 10%. Now there are a lot of startups, and because of the growth of Grand Rapids, there are a lot more people getting involved. And honestly, I think property management is the way of the future for brokers and real estate agents. I think they should be involved. They should get involved. I think the traditional real estate market is going to change with how real estate agents work. And so as our country grows and as our city grows, young people are a lot more mobile and don't like to be tied down. So I think that the rental market will continue to grow. And I think it is important for other people, or brokers and real estate agents and that type of thing, to look seriously at property management. Getting back to your original question, sorry. 10% is generally standard. We negotiate that a little bit based on the quality of a property and the quantity of properties that an investor is going to bring to us. Generally, we don't go under 8%. When I'm doing a sales pitch, so I try to move people away from the monthly management and tell them to focus more on the vacancies, because if you're talking 8%, 9%, 10%. On $1,000 rental, you're talking $10 a month difference, right? So you may have a property manager who comes and says, hey, I'll give you 5% property management, sign up here. And I'm like, no, we're at, 10%. I'm sorry, we can't discount this. Meanwhile, our vacancies and our marketing and our scheduling, we have a system for that. So we're lowering the vacancies. We're putting it on more websites than anybody else. We have a full-time showing agent, all those types of things. I always say focus on the vacancies, because that same $1,000 unit that you're paying 5% property management for, if that property manager does not have the systems in place to get to that property the day that it's vacant, to change the locks, to start the rent ready process, to take pictures and that type of thing, you're losing $30 a day. Yeah. So that's a number where a lot of people call us and say, hey, what are your fees? And we rattle off our fees and we say, but as you're shopping for a property manager, come in it from a tenant perspective, back into it, look at their marketing, go online, try to schedule a showing. Do they have showings available for the property you want that same day? Or are they 5 days out, 6 days out? And I've seen some for 10 days out online. And that's where the real money is, in my opinion, on the turnovers and the vacancies.
That's awesome. Thanks for that. Seth, did you want to say something?
I was actually going to say, I don't really want Tim to hear this, but I'll just say it for the benefit of our viewers. I would pay Tim more if he charged me like 12 or even 15%. Like, I frankly think it's worth it when you talk about like the most important job or jobs of running a rental property portfolio. Like, you don't want to cheap out on something that really steers the whole ship and determines whether you succeed or fail. So yeah, I agree that the 10% thing, like, if they're doing their job and doing it well, like, I don't know why you would, make a big deal about that. So
yeah, well, a lot of people
pretend you didn't hear that from me.
No, I mean, you know what the beauty of it is we've been able to keep our rates between 8 and 10% for as long as I've been along with the company, and we don't have any plans of changing that. And the reason is because one, rent prices are increasing, therefore, we get $1 or $2 more when the rent prices increase. Mm-hmm. And secondly, a lot of our income actually comes through auxiliary fees from the tenant. So it could be, an application fee. It could be a placement fee. We make a little bit money on that. We break lease fees, lease violations, late rent actually is an income source for us. So we can keep the owner's bottom line the same and still operate with income coming through these, the tenant fees.
I really appreciate you breaking that down for us, Tim. I want to distill this down to just some very practical takeaways for our audience. Can you just give us like 3 to 5 warning signs of a really bad property management company so that when our audience hears this and they go out and they're interviewing their next potential property management company, what are some warning signs they can be on the lookout for that says, okay, I don't want to do business with this guy?
Or for that matter, if you're like in my situation where you already have one and you're trying to police them and make sure they're actually doing their job, like what do you look for to make sure they're actually doing what they're supposed to?
Yeah, it's hard for me to answer that one because I've never been with another property manager. So I'm only hearing what other investors who are coming to us, I try to get as much feedback from them. What didn't you like about your management company? What do you want to see your management company do for you? Why are you changing? Why are you exploring? What is the pain point? Those types of things. So I'll try to interview people when they call to determine those things. I would say a few things. One, communication. If your property manager doesn't respond to you within 24 hours, and you have an important question, that is, to me, it shouldn't happen. So if you're going on for, a week or more, I mean, I've heard horror stories, and of course, I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard no communication for months and those types of things. That's one. If there's any issues with payments, so you're not paid rent, but you're not getting your rent if you're not collecting your rent, that would be a serious red flag. One of local property managers here just went out of business. We've had 2 that have gone out of business in the last couple of years, and they've got in trouble with the security deposits and those types of things. And those investors weren't getting their rent checks. So if you notice that there is no rent checks coming for a month or 2, I would seriously look at what is going on with that management company, because they're trying to shuffle cash around and pay their investors and that type of thing. So I would say interruption in rent with no explainable circumstance would be a huge red flag. Transparency with maintenance, that's another thing. If they're having a hard time explaining what it was, or if you can't verify that repairs are made. I mean, I've had investors come to us and say, hey, we got billed for a water heater that was never installed. And we have pictures and those types of things. For the life of me, I cannot imagine doing that, unless there was an explainable mistake. But from the way it sounded, it wasn't explainable. And that comes with some of our transparency and why we want to take pictures of properties. I would also say, going back to the vacancy thing, the advertised units online and see what they're marketing and what that looks like, and compare that to other management companies. Are they marketing it in the best possible light? Do they really care about that, or are they just depending on the great economy for a tenant to decide to go look at your property and to rent it? So we take professional pictures, but there's other management companies that don't take professional pictures. Now, that doesn't mean you're a good management company or not, but when you're trying to do the best for the owner and lower that vacancy, you want to show that property in the best possible light. So we actually even notify our owners, hey, your property was marketed today. You can visit it on these websites. Here's a link to it. Check it out. Tell us what you think. If you see anything, please let us know. We want that engagement with that owner. And if we can improve our advertisement because the owner tells us, then by all means, we want that feedback to rent that property. So I don't know if I can really give you 5 points of red flags other than watching your rental income, watching repairs and the transparency of that, and then marketing. I mean, those are the key areas.
How often do either you or somebody in your company go out and visit tenants and properties? Like, how hands-on does this have to be, or should it be, for a property manager?
I go out to properties all the time. And even though I'm, part owner here at the company, I still visit properties. Generally, when it gets to a real big tenant issue or a liability issue, that we're trying to deal with, some of which are not our faults. I mean, last week we had the cold winter, or the cold polar vortex, or whatever they called it. Temperatures, minus 10 and all this other business. So I was visiting properties last week and, just checking on tenants, making sure that their heat is working, and, checking filters, and just some of that hands-on extra stuff that we're doing just to make sure we don't have a catastrophic incident. And a lot of that stuff owners don't realize we're doing for free. As we're driving by a property, we know that it's vacant. We're just like, hey, let me buzz in there real quick and check the temperature, make sure there's no issues. As a standard practice, we do a 4-month inspection. 4 months after a tenant moves in, we do an inspection. We call it the 120-day inspection. We're checking for additional tenants not on the lease. We're checking for pets. We're checking for smoking, checking for violations, basically, and we provide our report to the owner after that inspection. And then after that, if a tenant renews, we only do inspections annually. So those are the 2 formal inspections that we do for our owners. Other than that, it's furnace filter replacements. We're in the unit. Our techs are advised to just do a quick walkthrough, make sure there's no leaks, no running faucets, those types of things. But we're very careful not to look for work necessarily. We don't want to go in there every time we go to a property. We don't want to go change a filter and then come back to the owner with, a list of 10 things that need to be done. So we have to be cautious about that. That's a fine line that we walk. We want to know what the property looks like. We want to maintain it, but we don't want to just be always generating bills for the owner on maintenance. So
that kind of leads to another question. And I guess you can chime in with your thoughts, but to me, that seems like one of the hardest parts of being a property manager is not only dealing with all the tenants and all their issues, but also like managing expectations of the property owners. Because I'm sure some people want their place to look like the Taj Mahal, and others just don't really care at all. It's like, just pay me and I'm happy. So like, how do you figure out where the equilibrium is? How do you, do you have to do a survey? Like, tell me how nice you want your property, and we'll try to do that.
That is unquestionably the hardest part of property management, in my opinion, is navigating owners' expectations. And a lot of that happens on the sales process when I'm talking to them at the front end, understanding their goals, understanding if they have money in reserve for maintenance repairs. You can tell a lot by walking a property if an owner has self-managed it, just kind of what their tolerances for maintenance and that type of thing. And just meeting everybody's expectations is unquestionably the hardest part for us. So we do a little bit of that on the onboarding stage. We ask them, do you want fall and spring cleanup, for instance? That would be one where you can gauge an owner's level of attention to his property. So does he want the leaves picked up and the bushes trimmed, or doesn't he care about landscaping and curb appeal at all? We don't force our owners to do that, but there's a value to that. So we do gather some of those little kind of particular things along the way as we're signing up owners to really determine what level of service they want on their house. We had an owner from Texas about 3 or 4 months ago, visit their property, and they signed up for no landscaping. They had a Heritage Hill property, and they came to inspect it. And one of their 5 complaints is that it had spider webs in the landscape. And it was a serious thing to them. They were like, for the life of me, I cannot understand how you would permit this, how it wouldn't be caught, how it wouldn't be cleaned. And then we even showed them that they asked us not to do landscaping, and it was just a they just couldn't get over it. And we ended up separating our relationship because we knew we can't meet these owners' expectations. We can't possibly commit to, maintaining the landscape is bug free. So
that sounds like the kind of customer you want to fire.
Yep. It wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
Wasn't worth
That's
it.
exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. No, I bet, and I guess you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I would assume probably the hardest property owners to keep happy are those who are coming to you where they used to manage it themselves. So they sort of like, they know what their standard is, and you better live up to that. Is that accurate, or am I
You
wrong?
are 100% right. I just talked to an owner the other day, has 40 properties here. He's considering property management for the first time, and has always self-managed them. And that sounds awesome. And it's 40 houses. That's a huge deal for us. And then, in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, so all 40 tenants are going to be connected to this owner. So if there's anything that goes wrong, or we tell them anything that they don't like to hear, they're going to go to the owner. So the owners, for the first 6 to 8 months, you just have to know that the owner is going to be involved. And so you have to tell that owner, you have to defer all questions to the management company. You have to separate yourself, because if there's not that separation, it's going to be hard for us. We're going to be getting third person information because it's going to come from the tenant to the owner to us. And so managing that is very difficult, especially owners who live in town, who, this is their baby. Those types of things, we tread lightly on those, understandingly though, because it's, their property. They've always done it. They know how to do most things to do with their property. And so they're going to, try to dictate a lot of the way we do things, which, can also be challenging. So when you're taking on a new owner, setting those expectations, just having real clear understandings on what the roles are and who's doing what is very important.
Would you rather have one owner with 50 properties or 10 owners with 5 properties? But what I'm getting at is, like, would you rather like have it all in one package where you could lose that overnight if they don't like you, or sort of spread the risk out a little bit?
Definitely. I mean, we definitely want to spread the risk out. Obviously we're going to take an owner on that has 40 or 50 properties. We're going to be very happy to do that. But yeah, at some point, owners can kind of dictate your business if they get too big. They can ask you to do things that are outside of your normal systems, and your business becomes dependent on that owner because you structure a lot of things around them because they're such a big client. So yeah, it is one of those things where it is nice to have a lot of owners and less large owners.
What were some of the biggest obstacles that you had to deal with in the beginning when you first got into this business? Because obviously you kind of scaled, right? So you had about 5 employees. Now you're at 20. What were the biggest things that you had to overcome?
I don't think it's property management specific. It really comes down to growing pains and employees. Employees are, a challenge, and keeping them happy, keeping them motivated, keeping the company morale high. And it's a difficult business. So it's very draining on employees who are getting yelled at by tenants and, trying to collect rent and trying to meet owners' expectations and bills and those types of things. Yeah. So really it comes down to employee morale and good quality employees. So
how do you find a good one?
Well, when you're starting a business, it's hard because you can't afford to pay a good one. So that changed for us. Once we reached about 450 units, we could start paying employees a fair salary, if not a little bit better than market, as we acquired good employees and saw potential and saw growth. So hiring quality employees is definitely a big piece to the puzzle.
Jaron and I have actually talked before about how we both sort of thought that being a property manager is probably the worst possible job to have in all of real estate. I never want to do it. But I mean, we're speaking out of ignorance though, because neither of us have done it. But I mean, I just think about everything you have to deal with, and it's just like, oh my goodness. On the same coin though, it's like there's obviously a very big problem that needs to be solved, and if you can do a really good job at solving that, it's probably easy to get business. But I don't know. Like, would you agree with that? Or
yeah, it is difficult. Yeah, I've had an interesting, path in my career in property management. So I actually The hardest part is maintenance for any employees, because you're spending owners' monies. The owners are, wanting you to revise quotes and, cut out all the fat and those types of things. So that is probably the hardest part in our entire company. Believe it or not, it's not rent collection. It's not our collections department. It's coordinating maintenance, meeting tenants and owners' expectations, and getting employees in there with that have the ability to see big picture, understand a lot of projects at the same time, balance budgets, and all those types of things. So yeah, it's hard in the maintenance department. It has its ups and downs for sure. I mean, property management is not a piece of cake by any means. We're a service-based industry, so all we're doing is providing a service. So we're constantly looking at ways to improve our service and communicate and more efficient and keep the costs the same. All those types of struggles that any business goes through.
I had a question here, and I guess this question is intended specifically for you, not as an employee necessarily of a property management company, but somebody who's kind of worked their way up. You're sort of at or near the top, I would assume. You basically own the company. Is that right?
Yeah, partners. Yeah.
Okay. So from your perspective, where you're at now, like, what is the best part about being a property manager? Like, what are the good things about your work life?
I kind of anticipated this question. I was thinking about it, and I was trying to come down with like one or two things that were my favorite. And I realized that I thought when I was involved in property management, or maybe at my level, that I was going to be able to make a bigger impact on people's low income or, people who don't have a lot of resources. I thought I was going to be able to make a bigger impact on their lives. Mm-hmm. And the reality of it is that's just not the case. We find ourselves counseling and encouraging, and, we're talking to tenants who are crying on the phone every day, and you extend an olive branch and they're going to expect a tree, next month. Mm-hmm. So wow. You try to do it and you realize that you just can't. There's a very rare case when you're working with somebody. I can think of one or two in my past that were living in personal homes of me that were just really hardworking, single mothers and kids, and they just couldn't make it. And I've had the opportunity to bless them in ways that I didn't see. But that is obviously, the best part. I think when you can truly make an impact on somebody's life that really needs it, really deserves it, and just has been dealt a short stick. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. That's the best part. The second thing is kind of, not as deep as that one. I'm kind of a scavenger when it comes to houses. So I like to buy estates and foreclosed houses that have stuff in there. Mm-hmm. And I have this collection of old whiskey, for instance. I have a couple bottles of still sealed whiskey from the 1940s. I got a bottle of Hennessy from the 60s, and I found guns and newspapers from 1900s and 1890s and those types of things. So I kind of collect those types of things, and I really enjoy finding and, kind of building this little museum of interesting trinkets that have come out of these rental houses. So
have you ever gone to the Antique Roadshow? Do you have anything of
no, but
value?
I've watched that before. Uh-huh. No, I don't think I really have anything of value. It's more just kind of neat, the history, a lot of Grand Rapids related materials. And
that is cool. That.
So Tim, as we kind of wind down in today's interview, what advice would you have for a newbie who is thinking about getting started in the property management business?
Property management or investing? Just property management specifically?
I think so. Yeah.
I would start by managing your own properties for sure. Come into it with experience, or work at a property manager to see what you really like and what you don't like. You'll quickly find that, it's enticing because there's a certain level of passive income that you can obtain if you're managing, low maintenance homes and that type of thing, or higher level executive homes. But the reality of it is you're going to face, things like evictions and maintenance problems that you've never heard of or dealt with, or, don't have the first clue about, or, tenants and those types of things. So I would say to somebody who wants to start a property management business, I wouldn't start one without managing your own properties first, or having some level of understanding how to write a lease and to place tenants and screen them and that type of thing. Naturally from there, most property managers start in the real estate business somehow. So they're buying investment properties, they're representing investors to some degree, and that investor says, hey, do you want to manage this property for me? And that's a way that a lot of people get involved. Most realtors stay small and they manage, a handful of properties for their good good investor buyers. And then they have to make a decision at some point if they're going to make a real business out of it or if they're going to, start outsourcing some of that. So being involved in real estate, being involved in some level of managing your own properties would be definitely the starting point for anybody.
And for somebody who, if I'm brand new investor and I just think it's a great idea to be a property manager and I just want to start doing it tomorrow, is there some education or licensing or something that I need before I can actually start doing that legally? Like, don't you need a real estate agent license or something like that? Or?
Yeah, you do need to operate under a broker. So if you are going to be managing, you need to operate a management company under a broker. Our leasing agents are required to be licensed as agents to show houses and to write leases. So you have to be a licensed agent just to do that aspect of it, which is kind of a ripoff, but that's just the way it is. So yeah, you do have to have that if you're going to be leasing out properties for other people. And then your broker obviously has to agree and assume the additional liability that's involved in that.
I think I have heard that whole thing of how you have to do it under a broker is like a Michigan specific thing. Like other states may not necessarily have that. So if you're not in Michigan, I'm not saying I know the answer, but just look into that. That part may not be necessary. So, well, we've got 3 final wrap up questions. The first question is, what is your biggest fear?
Oh man, I
know.
Failure.
Failure?
Yep. That actually is a pretty easy answer for me.
Oh, okay.
I don't like failure. Whatever I do, I think part of my motivation and my drive is based off my fear of failure. And with that, I think comes the goal to succeed. So failure to me is probably what gets me out of bed, what motivates me every day to make sure that I continue, what we're doing here at United Properties. That all is on my heart pretty heavily.
So
that's awesome.
Just to dig a little deeper on that, what happens if you fail? Does that just cause you to question your worth as a man or something? Or I don't know, why is failure so bad?
Because I have pride.
Okay. Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. I mean, where failure brings you is some level of maybe disappointment in yourself, but are you disappointing somebody that's depending on you? So you could say that for your spouse, you could say that for your boss, you could say that for your clients. If I fail in what I'm doing, a lot of people are going to fail with me. My employees are, I pull into the parking lot and I see 15 cars out there and they're all dependent on this company, the income that it generates for their families. And so
that's a big deal.
There's a lot of things that happen as a result of that. But, those are all things that I consider.
Yeah.
You mentioned pride. What is something that you're most proud of in your life?
Oh boy.
Your collection of whiskey?
Yeah. That's not yet, but someday. What am I most proud of?
I know the answer, being on the REtipster podcast.
Yeah, I was trying to think of something different, but that's pretty.
It only goes downhill from here, man.
Yeah. What am I proud of? Without sounding prideful, I guess it's hard to answer that question, but I think we have built something great here at United Properties. My personal portfolio has just done amazing things for my family. It's going to do amazing things for my children, and just through real estate, we have created something that is going to last for generations in my family. And I would just kind of along with that, encourage people who are waffling or on the fence with real estate, just do it. I heard an investor tell a class of students here locally, he owns 150 houses. He says his number one advice to new investors is go borrow $1 million. And I'm not giving this advice, but this is his advice. Go borrow $1 million, buy real estate with it, and dig yourself out of that hole. And that will motivate you. That will get you involved. Like he just basically saying, go do it, because it is an amazing resource, an amazing opportunity to build wealth. And so I wish I did that earlier. I didn't know about it till I was 35-ish. So
I can tell you, just from the standpoint of looking at your company, it kind of reminds me in some ways of, it's a completely different business, but it reminds me in some ways of restaurants. I was talking to a restaurant owner one time I was like, so do you want your kids to get into this business? And he's like, absolutely not. Like, this is the hardest business I ever could imagine. And he actually ran like a very, very good, well-respected restaurant. But he was telling me how when one of the new patrons comes to his restaurant and they're waiting in the lobby and they see a little piece of garbage sitting outside the front door, like, that's not the restaurant owner's fault, but it still affects that person's experience. And they all of a sudden have this negative perception, even if it's really small. It's like, oh, this place is a dump. And, that's one of a million things that can negatively impact somebody's experience at a restaurant, to the food, to the service, to temperature in the place. I mean, whenever I go to a restaurant now and I have a really good experience, like, it has a whole new meaning to me now, because it's like, man, it's hard to pull that off, to really do that. And property management kind of reminds me of that, because there's so many little things that nobody really pays attention to, but they matter a heck of a lot. And it's one of those businesses that just seems super labor intensive, just difficult to deal with, probably emotionally at times. And the fact that you're able to do that and do it well on this kind of scale, like, that's not insignificant. That's kind of a big deal in my mind. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, we find ourselves dealing with unreasonable tenants all the time. And I one of the conversations I have is, hey, look, we're an agent for the owner. We're doing the best we can. We're not ignoring you. We're responding to every single call. We're responding to every single email. We're sending technicians out to your house to determine the problem and get estimates for the owners and that type of thing. But with technology and social media and Google reviews and this thing, you're constantly like, trying to avoid negative publicity with things that aren't even your fault. You're just really trying to help, to solve a problem for two people, really, the owner and the tenant. So it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Last question. What is the most important lesson you have ever learned?
In life or in property management?
Whatever pops into your mind, that's fine.
Important lesson. Let's see. I think that it comes down to following your dreams and doing what you love. And for me, I thought it was law enforcement, and I didn't see anything else in my life outside of law enforcement. When I got involved in real estate, I realized instantly that this was going to fill that cup 10 times over with my enjoyment and ability to do things I wasn't able to do before. So in conclusion, I would say the biggest lesson I've learned is that follow your passions and just go at them 100%, and take advice, listen to other people, surround yourself in whatever industry that you're doing, so that you can build a network of support of people that are going to lift you up and are going to push you and motivate you. Those are all very, very important for the business, particularly the real estate business, as your listeners probably know. Being around other people that share the same vision is just crucial to your success in this business and frankly in life.
When I think about your story, it reminds me a little bit of mine too, and probably a lot of people out there, how you maybe went to college or picked a career path pretty much right out of high school. Like, yep, that's where I'm going. And I've always thought, it's crazy how we live in a society where when you're like 18, 19 years old, you're supposed to know exactly what you're supposed to get into. And I don't think I really had any clarity like on the specifics of the route I wanted to take until like my late 20s. And I know some people like never really get that. They never have that aha moment, or at least not something what they actually believe they can do. And I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, because that's just kind of the system our society has built, but it's kind of a tragic thing in my mind that, a lot of people have to make this huge life decision on what their career is going to be and sort of get themselves down that path before they really even know if that's what they want. But I'm glad you were able to figure it out and change course.
Yep, I agree. Without having, $80,000 worth of college debt and then changing course. Imagine that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I think gap years are highly encouraged. I hope that when my children are, 18, 19, 20 years old, I'm going to highly encourage them to just go overseas, join the Peace Corps, go on a mission trip for a few years, do something that just kind of gives them some space to think and figure out what they're called to and what they want to do in life. I think it's a really important. I kind of did that, and it really helped me figure out my path.
Yeah. So I completely agree. I think college will change. I'm hoping college changes by the time my kids are there too. Online, half the cost, that type of thing.
Well, Tim, that kind of as a wrap for this interview,
Awesome.
you've been incredible. Appreciate all of your insights and your thoughts on how your life and your business works. If people want to learn more about you or your business, where can they go to do that?
Our website is www.rentupm.com. And my contact information is on our website. So if you'd like to get in touch, I'd be happy to talk to you about investing.
Cool, man. Thanks again for your time. Appreciate it very much. And hopefully I'll run into you again at the gym soon.
Yeah, you got it.
All right, man.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the REtipster podcast. For a full summary of this episode, stocked with links, show notes, and a lot more, check out the podcast archive page at retipster.com/podcast.